Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship. The used Defiance was the biggest and strongest ship in the human fleet. It had thick armor and powerful weapons. Jake had been a soldier for 30 years. He was tall and had gray hair. His eyes were sharp and missed nothing. The year was 2387. Humans had been traveling in space for over 200 years. They had built colonies on many worlds. Other alien races called humans Deathworlders because they came from Earth. Earth was a dangerous planet with storms, earthquakes, and wild animals. Most aliens thought it was too dangerous to live there. Jake was looking at the stars outside his window when his communication officer spoke up. "Admiral, we have an urgent message from the Galactic Council." The main screen turned on. A strange creature appeared on it. She looked like she was made of crystal and light. Her name was Ambassador Veltar. She was from a peaceful race called the Ethereal Collective. Jake had met her before at peace talks, but now Veltar looked scared. Her crystal body was shaking. Her voice came through the translator with fear in it. "Admiral Morrison, we need your help," she said. "The Void Swarm has returned. They destroyed the Kepler colonies in just 3 days. We sent 7 different fleets to stop them. All of them failed. The swarm is coming for the core worlds next." Jake felt his blood turn cold. He had heard stories about the Void Swarm. They were monsters that ate everything in their path. Ships, planets, even stars. They turned everything into more of themselves. The swarm had disappeared 200 years ago. Everyone hoped they were gone forever. Captain Lisa Parker stepped forward. She was Jake's second in command. Lisa was smart and brave. She had short black hair and always wore her uniform perfectly. "Admiral, I'm getting data from the Council now. The swarm is moving fast, much faster than the old records said they could." Commander Ryan Turner ran the ship's weapons and tactics. He was young, but very good at his job. Ryan brought up a holographic map of the galaxy. Red dots showed where the swarm had attacked. "Look at this pattern, Admiral. They're not just destroying things randomly. They're following a plan." Jake studied the map. The swarm was moving toward the center of the galaxy. That was where most of the peaceful races lived. Billions of innocent people would die if the swarm reached them. "Get me fleet command on Earth." Jake ordered. The screen changed. Admiral Susan Brooks appeared. She was sitting in the war room deep under the Rocky Mountains on Earth. Susan was older than Jake and had been his teacher at the academy. She had white hair and wore many medals on her uniform. "Jake, I've been watching the reports," Susan said. "This is bad, worse than bad. I'm giving you full command of Operation Manifest Destiny. You can use any ship and any soldier you need. How many ships can we get?" Jake asked. "Every ship we have," Susan replied. "I'm calling up the reserves. The mining ships, the cargo ships, even the old training vessels. We'll put guns on anything that can fly." Across human space, the call went out. Every colony received the same message. The human race was in danger. Everyone who could fight was needed. On the mining world of New Vegas, Colonel Pete Davis was loading heavy guns onto cargo ships. Pete was a big man with strong arms from years of hard work. He had served in the Marines before becoming a miner. Now he was a soldier again. "Load everything," he told his men. "The big guns, the small guns, and all the ammunition we can carry. We're going to war." At the research station near Jupiter, Dr. Helen Martinez was working day and night. She was uploading new weapon designs to the fleet computers. Helen was brilliant. She had invented many of the weapons the human fleet used. "These new missiles should work better against the swarm," she told her team. "The swarm adapts to our weapons, but these missiles change themselves as they fly." All across human space, people were leaving their homes to join the fight. Tony, Rodriguez had been a Marine sergeant. Now he was a farmer on New Terra. But when the call came, he left his farm and went to the spaceport. "I have to go," he told his wife. "The universe needs us." Katie Williams was an engineer who worked for a big company. She had a good job and made lots of money. But when she heard about the swarm, she quit her job and signed up for the fleet. "Money doesn't matter if we're all dead," she said. The alien races watched in amazement as humans prepared for war. Other races needed weeks or months to make decisions. They had to talk to their leaders and vote on what to do. But humans just acted. They didn't waste time with meetings or debates. In just 5 days, the human fleet was ready. Over 300 ships gathered at the Titan yards. The yards were humanity's biggest shipbuilding facility. They floated in space near Saturn. The ships were all different sizes. There were small, fast corvettes with just 20 crew members. There were medium destroyers with 100 crew members. And there were huge battleships with over 1,000 crew members each. Jake's ship, the Defiance, was the biggest of all. It was 5 kilometers long and had enough firepower to destroy a small moon. But even the Defiance looked small compared to what they were about to face. Ambassador Veltar sent another message. "Admiral Morrison, the swarm has taken the Rigel system. They're moving toward the core worlds. You are our last hope." Jake looked at his crew. They were ready to fight. They were ready to die if necessary. That was what made humans different from other races. They didn't give up. They didn't run away when things got bad. "Set course for the outer rim," Jake ordered. "It's time to show the swarm what happens when they threaten our galaxy." The human fleet moved out into space. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and smaller. Ahead of them waited the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known. But the humans were not afraid. They were Deathworlders. They were used to facing impossible odds. The war for the galaxy was about to begin. The human fleet moved through space like a pack of wolves. 300 ships flew in perfect formation. Each ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. The alien observers had never seen anything like it. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance. He was thinking about the battle ahead. The Void Swarm was unlike any enemy humans had ever fought. They were not just machines or aliens. They were something worse. "Admiral," said Captain Lisa Parker, "we're receiving a message from Captain Greg Stone." Captain Stone commanded the U.S. Vengeance. It was a heavy cruiser with thick armor and big guns. Greg was a good captain and a brave man. He had volunteered to lead the advance scouts. "Put him on screen," Jake ordered. Greg Stone appeared on the main display. He was a tall man with brown hair and serious eyes. Behind him, his bridge crew was working hard at their stations. "Admiral, my ship is ready to jump ahead and scout the enemy," Greg said. "We'll find out what we're facing and report back." "Good. Take 5 ships with you. Be careful, Greg. We don't know what the swarm can do now." "Understood, sir. Vengeance out." The scout ships jumped into hyperspace. They would reach the outer edge of swarm territory in 2 days. The rest of the fleet would follow more slowly. On the Vengeance, Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster was studying the sensor readings. Amy was young but very smart. She had graduated at the top of her class from the Naval Academy. She was the ship's science officer. "Captain, I'm picking up strange energy readings," she reported. "The swarm has changed since the last time we fought them. Their technology is more advanced now." Chief Engineer Carlos Mendez was working in the engine room. Carlos was an older man with gray hair and strong hands. He had been fixing ships for 20 years. He knew every bolt and wire on the Vengeance. "The engines are running smooth, Captain," Carlos reported over the intercom. "But I'm seeing some weird interference on our sensors. It's like something is trying to scan us." Captain Stone frowned. The swarm is already looking for us. Stay alert, everyone." 2 days later, the scout ships reached the edge of swarm territory. What they found made their blood run cold. Entire solar systems had been destroyed. Planets were gone. Even the asteroids and space dust had been consumed. "Jesus Christ," whispered Navigator Beth Clark. She was looking at her instruments with horror. "There's nothing left. It's like the swarm ate everything." The Vengeance moved slowly through the dead system. Where there should have been planets, there were only strange metal structures. They looked like giant spider webs made of dark metal. The structures pulsed with red light. "Those are processing stations," Amy realized. "The swarm uses them to break down matter and turn it into more swarm creatures." Captain Stone ordered his ships to stay hidden behind the wreckage of an old space station. They watched as swarm ships moved through the system. The swarm ships were horrible to look at. They were not built like normal ships. Instead, they looked like living things made of metal and flesh. "They're organic," Amy whispered. "Part machine, part biology. No wonder they can adapt so fast." The scout ships returned to the main fleet with their terrible news. Admiral Morrison called a meeting of all his captains. The conference room on the Defiance was full of worried faces. "The situation is worse than we thought," Jake told them. "The swarm has grown stronger. They're not just destroying things anymore. They're converting everything into more of themselves." Commander Valesh of the Spiral Empire was also at the meeting. Her people were reptilian aliens with scales and sharp teeth. Her ship had joined the human fleet after barely escaping from a swarm attack. "Admiral Morrison, you must understand," Valesh said, her voice shaking. "We have fought the swarm for months. Every weapon we used against them, they learned to counter. Our plasma cannons, our quantum torpedoes, even our kinetic weapons. Nothing worked for long." Dr. Helen Martinez had joined the fleet as their chief science officer. She was studying the data from the scout mission. Helen was a small woman with intelligent eyes and quick hands. "Commander Valesh is right," Helen said. "The swarm doesn't just adapt to our weapons. They actually absorb the technology and improve it. They're like a virus that learns from everything it touches." Jake looked around the room. His captains were scared. Even his bravest officers looked worried. The swarm seemed impossible to beat. "What about their weaknesses?" Jake asked. "Everything has a weakness. They're controlled by artificial intelligence," Helen replied. "But it's not like our computers. It's something much more complex. The swarm thinks as one giant mind." Meanwhile, on Earth, the news was spreading. President Maria Santos spoke to the world from the White House. She was a strong woman who had led the country through many crises. "My fellow humans," she said, "our fleet has gone to fight an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy. They carry with them the hopes and prayers of every person on Earth. We must have faith that they will succeed." In cities around the world, people gathered to watch the news. Families whose sons and daughters were with the fleet prayed for their safety. Children asked their parents if the monsters would come to Earth. Back with the fleet, the captains were still discussing strategy. Captain Sandra White of the U-East Thunderbolt had an idea. Sandra was a small woman with red hair and a quick mind. "What if we don't try to match their technology?" she suggested. "What if we use tactics they've never seen before?" "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "The swarm learns from other aliens," Sandra explained. "But they've never fought humans before. Our technology is different. Our tactics are different. Maybe that's our advantage." Commander Ryan Turner was nodding. "She's right, Admiral. Human technology develops separately from the rest of the galaxy. The swarm might not be able to adapt to it right away." Dr. Martinez was thinking hard. There's something else. The swarm has been fighting organized fleets, military formations. Standard tactics. But humans don't always fight that way. What do you mean? Jake asked. We improvise, Helen said. We change our plans in the middle of battle. We use whatever weapons we can find. Other races plan everything in advance. But humans adapt as they go. Jake felt a spark of hope. Maybe they had a chance after all. Signal the fleet. We're going to implement Protocol Chaos. Protocol Chaos was a new kind of battle plan. Instead of giving detailed orders to every ship, Jake would give his captains general objectives. Then they would be free to use their own judgment and creativity. Every captain will have full authority to change tactics during battle, Jake announced. Use whatever weapons you have. Try new things. Be unpredictable. The alien officers were shocked. In their military traditions, soldiers always followed orders exactly. The idea of giving captains so much freedom was strange to them. But Commander Valesh understood. You're going to be chaotic, she realized. Random. The swarm won't be able to predict what you'll do, because you don't know what you'll do. Exactly, Jake smiled. We're going to fight like humans. Wild, unpredictable, and dangerous. The fleet prepared for battle. In the weapon bays, soldiers loaded guns with everything they could find. Regular missiles, mining explosives, even old-fashioned bullets. If it could hurt the enemy, they would use it. In the fighter bays, pilots like Lieutenant Jack Bailey were preparing their small ships. Jack was a young man with blonde hair and steady hands. He had been flying since he was 16. Listen up, pilots, Jack told his squadron. We're going to fight like our ancestors did. Fast, mean, and smart. These swarm things think they know everything. Let's show them they're wrong. The human fleet moved deeper into swarm territory. Behind them, the galaxy held its breath. Ahead of them, the most dangerous enemy in the universe was waiting. But the humans were not afraid. They were Deathworlders. They had survived ice ages, plagues, and wars. They had turned a deadly planet into their home. Now they would save the galaxy or die trying. The real battle was about to begin. The human fleet reached the edge of active swarm territory. The sensors were screaming warnings. Massive shapes moved in the darkness of space. They were unlike anything the humans had ever seen. Captain Greg Stone stood on the bridge of the Vengeance. His ship was leading the advance force. Through the viewports, he could see the first swarm creatures. They were huge, writhing masses of metal and flesh. They pulsed with dark energy like giant hearts. My God, whispered Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster. They're alive, actually alive. The swarm creatures were not ships in any normal sense. They looked like giant worms or snakes made of black metal. Their skin was covered with thousands of smaller creatures that moved like insects. Red lights flickered under their surface. All ships. This is Stone, Greg said into his communicator. First contact with active swarm entities. They're bigger than our intelligence reports said. Much bigger. The largest swarm creature was over 2 kilometers long. It moved through space with smooth, flowing motions. Smaller creatures swarmed around it like pilotfish around a shark. Captain, called out Chief Engineer Carlos Mendez from the engine room. I'm getting weird readings from our computers. It's like something is trying to break in. They're scanning us, Amy realized. They're trying to understand our technology. The swarm creatures began to move toward the human ships. They didn't fire weapons. Instead, they extended long tentacles that reached across space. The tentacles glowed with the same red light as the creatures' bodies. Evasive maneuvers, Greg ordered. All ships avoid contact with those tentacles. The human ships scattered, like leaves in the wind. They were much smaller than the swarm creatures, but they were also much faster. The corvette USS Hawk barely avoided a tentacle that would have wrapped around it. "They're trying to grab us," reported Captain Ben Miller of the Hawk. "Those tentacles aren't weapons. They're tools. They want to take us apart and study us." Greg made a quick decision. "All ships, open fire. Hit them with everything we've got." The human ships unleashed their weapons. Missiles streaked through space. Laser beams cut through the darkness. Railgun shots hit the swarm creatures at incredible speed. The weapons struck the creatures and exploded. For a moment, the humans thought they had won. But then something terrible happened. The damage began to heal. The creatures' wounds closed. New armor grew over the damaged areas. "They're adapting," Amy said in horror. "They're learning from our attacks." But something was different this time. The swarm creatures were taking longer to heal than usual. Their adaptation process was slower. "Wait," Amy called out excitedly. "Look at the sensor readings. They're having trouble with our weapons." She was right. The swarm creatures were struggling to understand human technology. Human weapons worked on different principles than alien weapons. The creatures' adaptive systems were confused. "Hit them again," Greg ordered, "before they figure us out." The second attack was even more effective. The swarm creatures writhed in pain. One of the smaller ones actually died, its body breaking apart into floating pieces. Chief Petty Officer Dan Murphy was working in the Vengeance's computer core. He was a small man with thick glasses and quick fingers. Dan had been fighting computer viruses for 10 years. "Captain," Dan called out, "they're still trying to hack our systems. But our quantum encryption is holding them off. They can't break through." This was humanity's first real advantage. Human computer systems were completely different from alien technology. The swarm had learned to break alien codes, but human codes were like nothing they had ever seen. "Keep monitoring our systems," Greg ordered. "Let me know if they make any progress." The battle continued for 2 hours. More swarm creatures arrived, but the humans were learning too. They discovered that the creatures moved in predictable patterns. They followed programs like giant computers. Lieutenant Jack Bailey was flying his fighter between the swarm creatures. His small ship was like a mosquito compared to the giants. But mosquitoes could be very annoying. "They're not really thinking," Jack reported over the radio. "They're just following orders, like robots." Jack's fighter squadron began attacking the creatures' sensor arrays. The small ships were too fast for the creatures to catch. They darted in, fired their weapons, and darted out again. "This is like fighting a computer virus," Jack said. "They're smart, but they're not creative." Meanwhile, Admiral Morrison was watching the battle from the Defiance. The main fleet was still an hour away, but he could see that his advance force was holding their own. "They're doing it," he said to Captain Lisa Parker. "They're actually hurting the swarm." Dr. Helen Martinez was studying the battle data as it came in. She was excited by what she was seeing. "Admiral, I think I understand what's happening. The swarm creatures are artificial intelligences, very advanced, but still just computers." "What does that mean?" Jake asked. "It means they can only work within their programming," Helen explained. "They can adapt and learn, but they can't truly create. They can't think outside their original design." This was a crucial discovery. The swarm was incredibly powerful, but it had limitations. It could only improve on existing ideas. It couldn't invent completely new ones. "Get me Captain Stone," Jake ordered. Greg's face appeared on the main screen. Behind him, the battle was still raging. "Admiral, we're holding them off. But more are coming. We need the main fleet." "We're on our way," Jake promised. "But I need you to try something. Start using random tactics. Don't follow any standard patterns. Be as unpredictable as possible." "Understood, sir." Greg turned to his crew. You heard the Admiral. Time to get creative. Amy, what's the craziest thing we can do? Amy Foster thought for a moment. What if we ram them? Not to destroy them, but to get inside their defensive perimeter? That's insane, Greg said. I love it. The Vengeance charged straight at the largest swarm creature. The creature extended its tentacles to grab the ship. But at the last second, Greg ordered full reverse thrust. The ship spun around and fired all its weapons at point-blank range. The attack caught the creature completely off guard. Its adaptive systems had been preparing for a ramming attack. They weren't ready for a spinning, backwards assault. It worked. Amy shouted. We confused its defensive systems. Other human ships began copying the tactic. They would charge forward, then suddenly change direction and attack from unexpected angles. The swarm creatures couldn't adapt fast enough. Commander Rachel Torres of the UES Reckoning tried a different approach. She had her crew load mining charges into the torpedo tubes. When the explosives hit the swarm creature, they didn't just explode on the surface. They burrowed deep inside and exploded from within. If they want to eat our ships, Rachel said with a grin, let's give them indigestion. The battle was turning in humanity's favor. The swarm creatures were powerful, but they were predictable. They followed patterns. And humans were very good at breaking patterns. But then the situation changed. Deep space sensors detected something massive approaching. It was bigger than anything they had seen before. Much bigger. My God, whispered the sensor operator. It's the size of a small moon. The new arrival was the largest swarm creature ever recorded. It was over 50 kilometers long and covered with weapons. Smaller creatures swarmed around it, like children around their mother. That's got to be their command ship, Greg realized. Or their queen. The massive creature didn't attack immediately. Instead, it began transmitting data to the other swarm creatures. Within minutes, they began adapting to human tactics. They're sharing information, Amy said. The big one is teaching the others how to fight us. The tide of battle began to turn. The swarm creatures were no longer confused by human tactics. They began to counter every move the humans made. We need help, Greg said, and we need it now. That's when Admiral Morrison arrived with the main fleet. 300 human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. The sight was awesome and terrifying. This is Admiral Morrison to all swarm forces, Jake said over an open channel. You have threatened innocent lives. You have destroyed peaceful worlds. Now you face the full power of the human fleet. We are Deathworlders. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. And we do not lose. The real battle was about to begin. The human fleet spread out across space like a steel cloud. 300 ships of all sizes took their positions. The massive swarm creature floated in the center of the battlefield like a dark mountain. Around it, smaller swarm creatures moved. In perfect coordination, Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance. He was watching the tactical display with sharp eyes. The enemy outnumbered them, but humans had faced worse odds before. All ships, this is Morrison, he said, into his communicator. We're going to show these creatures what happens when they threaten our galaxy. Remember, be unpredictable. Use everything you've learned about fighting thinking machines. Dr. Helen Martinez was studying the sensor data from her science station. She had been analyzing the swarm's behavior patterns for hours. Admiral, I've figured out something important. The swarm creatures aren't just following orders. They're all connected to that big one. It's like a giant brain controlling smaller bodies. What does that mean for us? Jake asked. If we can damage their communication system, the smaller creatures might stop working together, Helen explained. They'll become less coordinated. Captain Sandra White of the UES Thunderbolt was listening to the conversation. Sandra was known for her clever tactics. She had red hair and a quick mind that always found new solutions. "Admiral, I have an idea," Sandra said. "What if we don't try to destroy them? What if we confuse them instead?" "Explain," Jake ordered. "My ship can project holographic decoys," Sandra said. "We can make it look like there are dozens of thunderbolts attacking from different directions. The swarm creatures will waste time and energy trying to fight fake targets." "Do it," Jake said. "All ships with holographic projectors. Follow, Captain." White's lead, the human fleet, began its attack. The first wave consisted of ships that could create false images of themselves. Suddenly, the space around the swarm creatures was filled with hundreds of human ships. Most of them weren't real, but the swarm couldn't tell the difference. The massive swarm creature began firing at the holographic ships. Its weapons were incredibly powerful. Each shot could destroy a human battleship, but the shots passed harmlessly through the fake targets. "It's working," Sandra reported. "They're wasting their ammunition on ghosts." While the swarm was distracted, the real human ships moved into position. They attacked from angles the enemy wasn't expecting. The swarm creatures tried to adapt, but they were getting confused by all the false information. Chief Engineer Carlos Mendez was working in the engine room of the Vengeance. He had been studying the swarm's adaptation process. Carlos was an older man with strong hands and a practical mind. "Captain Stone," Carlos called out, "I think I've figured out how they adapt to our weapons. They're like a computer virus. They scan our technology and then copy it, but they can only handle so much information at once." "What are you suggesting?" Captain Greg Stone asked. "We overload them," Carlos said. "If we hit them with too many different types of weapons at the same time, their systems might crash." This led to a new tactic called Operation Overload. The human ships began transmitting massive amounts of random data at the swarm creatures. The data pretended to be weapon specifications, but it was actually just nonsense. The swarm creatures' adaptive systems tried to process all the information. They began making weapons to counter threats that didn't exist. Their bodies twisted and changed as they tried to adapt to imaginary dangers. "They're overheating," Amy Foster reported from the Vengeance's science station. "Their processing systems are being overwhelmed." Colonel Pete Davis was commanding a group of Marine transport ships. Pete was a big man with military experience. He had loaded his ships with old-fashioned weapons and explosives. "Admiral," Pete said, "request permission to try something crazy." "What do you have in mind, Colonel?" Jake asked. "These creatures expect high-tech weapons," Pete explained. "Energy beams, smart missiles, quantum torpedoes. What if we hit them with something simple? Something their systems won't recognize? Like what? Chemical explosives? Kinetic weapons? Old-fashioned bullets? Stuff that works by basic physics? Not advanced technology." Jake thought about it. The idea was so simple it might work. "Permission granted. Try it." Pete's Marines launched the first boarding assault in the war. Their ships flew straight at a medium-sized swarm creature. The creature extended its tentacles to grab them, but the Marines were ready. "Now!" Pete shouted. The Marines fired rocket-propelled grenades at the creature's tentacles. The simple weapons weren't very advanced, but they were effective. The tentacles were severed, spurting strange fluids into space. The Marine ships landed on the creature's surface. The Marines cut their way inside using plasma torches and explosives. The creature's internal defenses were designed to stop energy, weapons, and smart missiles. They had no defense against Marines with rifles and grenades. "We're inside," Pete reported. "This thing is like a giant computer. All circuits and processing units. We're planting charges now." The charges were simple. Chemical explosives. Nothing fancy or high-tech. The creature's systems couldn't figure out how to counter them. When the charges exploded, they tore through the creature's internal structure. The swarm creature died with a sound like a screaming computer. Its body broke apart and floated away in pieces. "It worked," Pete shouted. "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Other human ships began copying the tactic. They used simple weapons that the swarm couldn't easily adapt to. Kinetic projectiles that worked by pure momentum. Chemical explosives that worked by basic chemistry. Even old-fashioned nuclear weapons thought the tide of battle began to turn. The swarm creatures were powerful, but they were having trouble adapting to human creativity. Every time they figured out one tactic, the humans tried something completely different. Lieutenant Jack Bailey was leading his fighter squadron against the swarm's smaller creatures. His fighters were tiny compared to the enemy, but they were fast and maneuverable. "These things fly in formation," Jack reported. "They follow predictable patterns. If we can break their formation, they get confused." The human fighters began attacking the swarm creatures' communication arrays. These were the organs that let the creatures coordinate with each other. When the arrays were damaged, the creatures began flying into each other. "They're like birds," Jack realized. "They flock together. But if you disrupt the flock, they don't know what to do." The human fleet was winning, but victory came at a cost. Many ships were damaged or destroyed. Good men and women were dying. To protect the galaxy, Captain Ben Miller of the corvette USS Hawk was badly wounded. His ship was crippled, but he kept fighting. "This is for everyone who can't fight back," he said as he rammed his ship into a swarm creature's brain center. The massive swarm creature was getting desperate. It began calling for reinforcements. Deep space sensors detected more swarm forces approaching, hundreds of them. "Admiral," reported Commander Ryan Turner, "we have a problem. More swarm creatures are coming. Lots more." Jake looked at the tactical display. The approaching forces were enormous. His fleet had fought hard, but they were outnumbered 50-1. "How long until they arrive?" Jake asked. 30 minutes, Ryan replied. Ambassador Veltar's voice came over the communication system. Her crystalline form was shimmering with emotion. "Admiral Morrison, our deep space sensors showed the swarm reinforcements. You must retreat. You've done enough. You've proven they can be hurt." But Jake Morrison shook his head. "We're not retreating. We came here to stop the swarm, and that's what we're going to do." "But Admiral," Veltar protested, "you'll all be killed." Jake smiled grimly. "Maybe, but we'll take as many of them with us as we can. That's what Deathworlders do." The human fleet regrouped for the final battle. They had learned much about fighting the swarm. They knew the creature's weaknesses, but they also knew the odds were against them. "All ships," Jake announced, "we're about to face the main swarm force. Some of us won't make it home. But remember what we're fighting for. We're fighting for every innocent life in the galaxy. We're fighting for the future." The reinforcements arrived like a dark tide. Thousands of swarm creatures filled the space around the human fleet. They came in all sizes, from small fighters to massive battleships. At their head was the largest creature yet seen. It was the size of a small moon, covered with weapons and armor. "That's their queen," Dr. Martinez realized. "The central intelligence that controls all the others." Jake looked at the massive creature. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Its surface pulsed with red light like a giant heart. Around it, smaller creatures moved in perfect harmony. "If we can destroy that thing," Jake said, "we might be able to shut down the entire swarm network. But how could they reach it?" The queen was protected by thousands of smaller creatures. It would take a miracle to get through their defenses. That's when Jake Morrison made the hardest decision of his life. He was about to risk everything on one desperate gamble. The final battle was about to begin. The human fleet faced impossible odds. Thousands of swarm creatures surrounded them like a dark ocean. At the center of the enemy force floated the Swarm Queen. She was massive, bigger than any human city. Her surface pulsed with red light like a giant beating heart. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance. He was looking at the tactical display with calm eyes. His officers were scared, but Jake had made his decision. He was going to save the galaxy or die trying. "All ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he said into his communicator. "We're going to do something that has never been done before. We're going to ram the Queen." The bridge went silent. Captain Lisa Parker stared at her admiral in shock. "Sir, that's suicide. The crew will all die." "Only if we fail," Jake replied. "But if we succeed, we'll save billions of lives." Jake turned to face his crew. "I'm calling for volunteers. Anyone who wants to stay with the Defiance for this final mission, step forward. Anyone who wants to transfer to another ship, no shame in that." Every single person on the bridge stepped forward. Not one person wanted to leave. They were all willing to die to stop the swarm. "Signal the fleet," Jake ordered. "Ask for volunteers for a one-way mission." Within minutes, every ship in the fleet was sending messages. Thousands of crew members wanted to join the suicide mission. There wasn't room for all of them on the Defiance. Commander Ryan Turner was coordinating the final battle plan. He was a young officer, but he had proven himself in battle. "Admiral, the other ships will create a diversion. They'll attack the Queen's outer defenses while we make our run." Dr. Helen Martinez was working at her science station. She had been studying the Queen's structure for hours. "Admiral, I've found her weak spot. There's a central core deep inside her body. If we can reach it and detonate our weapons there, we might be able to shut down her entire network." Lieutenant Jack Bailey was preparing his fighter squadron for the final attack. Jack was a brave pilot who had survived many battles. "All fighters, this is our last dance. We're going to clear a path for the Admiral. Make every shot count." The human fleet began its final assault. The smaller ships attacked the swarm's outer defenses. Explosions lit up the darkness of space. Human ships were destroyed one by one, but they kept fighting. Captain Greg Stone of the Vengeance was leading a group of heavy cruisers. His job was to punch a hole through the enemy lines. "Follow me," he shouted. "We're going to show these monsters what human courage looks like." The Vengeance charged straight at the largest swarm defenders. Enemy weapons hit the ship again and again. The hull was breached in dozens of places, but Greg kept his ship moving forward. "For humanity," Greg yelled as his ship exploded in a brilliant fireball. The explosion cleared a path through the enemy. Formation. Captain Sandra White of the Thunderbolt was using her holographic projectors to confuse the enemy. Dozens of fake ships appeared around the Queen, drawing her fire away from the real attack. "Keep her guessing," Sandra said to her crew. "Don't let her figure out which ship is real." The Queen was firing her massive weapons at the human fleet. Each shot could destroy a battleship, but the humans were too spread out. She couldn't hit them all at once. Colonel Pete Davis was leading his Marines in a desperate boarding assault. They were attacking the Queen's surface defenses, trying to disable her weapons. Pete's men were fighting hand-to-hand with swarm creatures inside the Queen's body. "Keep moving," Pete shouted. "Don't let them surround us." The Marines were using simple weapons that the swarm couldn't adapt to quickly: rifles, grenades, and flamethrowers. They were like ancient warriors fighting in a high-tech war. The Defiance was making its final approach. The massive dreadnought was taking heavy fire from all sides. Her armor was cracking. Her weapons were failing, but she kept moving toward the Queen. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Damage Control. Engine room is flooded. We're losing power. Keep her together." "Just a little longer," Jake ordered. "We're almost there." Chief Engineer Carlos Mendez was working in the engine room. Water was pouring in from broken pipes. Sparks flew from damaged computers. But Carlos kept the engines running. "Admiral," Carlos called out, "I can give you full power for one more minute. After that, we're dead in space." "1 minute is all we need," Jake replied. The Defiance pushed through the last line of defenders. The Queen's massive form filled the viewports. She was so big that she blocked out the stars. Her surface was covered with weapons and armor, but Jake could see gaps between the plates. "There!" Dr. Martinez pointed at the tactical display. "That opening leads to her core. We can fit through there." "Take us in," Jake ordered. The Defiance dove toward the Queen's surface. She was moving too fast for the Queen's weapons to track. The massive ship slammed into the Queen's body and kept going. Inside the Queen, the corridors were filled with strange light. The walls pulsed like living tissue. Swarm creatures attacked the human ship, but the Defiance's thick armor protected her crew. "We're inside," Captain Parker reported, heading for the core. The Defiance pushed deeper into the Queen's body. The corridors were getting narrower. The ship was scraping against the walls, but they were almost at their target. "There it is," Dr. Martinez said. "The central core. It's beautiful." The Queen's core was a sphere of pure energy. It pulsed with brilliant light. Around it, thousands of data streams flowed like rivers of information. This was the brain that controlled the entire swarm network. "All crew to escape pods," Jake ordered. "This is where we part company." "Admiral," Lisa Parker said, "we're not leaving you." "That's an order, Captain," Jake replied. "Someone needs to survive to tell the story." The crew reluctantly moved to the escape pods. They didn't want to leave their admiral, but they followed orders. One by one, the pods launched into space. Jake Morrison was alone on the bridge of the Defiance. He looked at the Queen's core through the viewports. It was the most beautiful and terrible thing he had ever seen. "This is for everyone who can't fight back," he said quietly. Jake activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. Every weapon on the Defiance would explode at the same time. The explosion would be big enough to destroy a small moon. 10 seconds. The computer announced. Jake thought about his home on Earth. He thought about his wife and children. He thought about all the innocent people in the galaxy who deserved to live in peace. 5 seconds. Jake stood up straight. He was not afraid. He was a Deathworlder. He was used to facing death. "Goodbye," he whispered. The Defiance exploded with the force of a small sun. The explosion tore through the Queen's core, sending cascades of energy through her entire body. The data streams collapsed. The control systems failed. Across the galaxy, swarm creatures suddenly stopped moving. Their connection to the Queen was broken. Without her guidance, they were just empty shells floating in space. The human fleet had won, but at a terrible cost. Of the 300 ships that had started the mission, only 97 survived. Thousands of brave men and women had died to save the galaxy. 3 days later, the surviving ships returned to human space. They were greeted as heroes. The entire galaxy celebrated their victory. The swarm was defeated, and peace was restored. Ambassador Veltar spoke at the memorial service for the fallen. Her crystalline form shimmered with tears. "Today we honor not just the human dead, but the human spirit. They came when we called. They fought when we couldn't. They died so that we might live." The alien races of the galaxy finally understood what made humans special. They didn't just fight for victory. They fought for what was right. They didn't just defend themselves. They defended everyone. President Maria Santos spoke to the world from the White House. "Our heroes have returned home. They have saved not just humanity, but all life in the galaxy. We will never forget their sacrifice. The galaxy was changed forever." Humans were no longer seen as dangerous outsiders. They were now the protectors of the innocent. The Deathworlder fleet would continue to patrol the galaxy, ready to answer any call for help. Admiral Susan Brooks, now the head of the Galactic Defense Force, established new bases throughout the galaxy. Human ships would be stationed near every major population center, ready to respond to threats. Captain Lisa Parker, now promoted to Admiral, commanded the new fleet. She stood on the bridge of the UESS Defiance II, the replacement for Jake Morrison's ship. The new ship was bigger and stronger than the original, but it carried the same name and the same mission. "We are the guardians of the galaxy," Lisa said to her crew. "We stand watch so that others may sleep peacefully." In the depths of space, new threats were always emerging. Pirates, rogue nations, and ancient evils that had been sleeping for millennia. But now the galaxy had protectors. The Deathworlder fleet was ready for anything. The humans had answered the universe's plea for help. They had saved the galaxy from extinction. And they would continue to stand guard, ready to face whatever darkness might come. The age of human galactic protection had begun.